Okay, Patrick, you can go.
Okay, thanks very much, Barry. Sorry to everyone that it's been so painful logging on. Hopefully everyone will see a slide that starts from London to Bangalore. My name is Patrick Watt. I'm an Executive Director at Goldman Sachs and have responsible for the firm's health and wellness programs across the EMEA and India region. I thought today, just based on what Wolf wanted me to cover, is really to give a very brief overview of Goldman Sachs and the Wellness Exchange that we have here. Some context in terms of how we see the programme from a global perspective, and then move into some detail about how we have tried as best as possible to move from this global model into a more localised environment, using Bangalore as the example. I think anyone that works or has a broader remit than just country specific will know that some of the challenges we've faced are unique, not just to Goldman's, but are a feature of many of the challenges that we have in trying to get the consistency across our various offices. Moving to the first slide, I'm sure most of you will be aware of who Goldman Sachs are, but for those that aren't, we are an investment bank and securities firm founded over 115 years ago. Currently we have 55 offices and 25,000 employees worldwide. The number of offices continues to grow, and in fact we are working on a piece of work at the moment for building out further offices in EMEA. London opened in 1970 with 5 people, but today our office stands at just over 5,000 people. We're fortunate in the sense that everyone is based on a campus arrangement, so most of our London offices are close together, which makes it easy from a wellness perspective to provide a level of on-site programming. The other office we're going to look at today is Bangalore. We opened Bangalore in 2004, mainly to provide operational and technology support to our European offices, and at the moment we have about 2,500 employees. The intention, nevertheless, is to grow that office to 5,000 people in the next 3 to 5 years. In terms of the Wellness Exchange, actually just moving on to the next slide, the Wellness Exchange is a global program, and it was established in 1999. We have, fortunately, probably one of the strongest brands within the firm, and we use what we call or refer to as the Goldman Sachs Wellness Exchange six-pack. So we focus quite specifically on fitness, health, nutrition, work and family, learning and recreation. And we use that brand in all our programming and on-site facilities. In terms of what our overarching mission is, it's to enhance the health and performance of the firm and our people. But at a more specific level, there are 4 key reasons as to why we believe wellness is an important part of the Goldman's infrastructure. Firstly, we recognise in the current environment that retaining and attracting talent is uppermost. And now Goldman's are competing not just with traditional investment banks, but we're competing with a range of different employers for the very best talent. And as a consequence, we want to ensure that the programs and the rewards that we offer are suitably positioned. From a wellness perspective, we see wellness as being a market-leading proposition, which interestingly is quite different to some of our other reward philosophies, where we see benefits, for instance, as being mid to upper quartile. Wellness does sit in a very different level. The second area that we try and achieve through a program is around delivering strategic advice to the business. And more specifically, the firm comes to us on quite a regular basis for advice around strategic programming, whether that be about compliance with legislations in various countries, so health and safety for instance, or about being able to respond to a pandemic. So not so long ago, and probably still etched in my brain, is the swine flu pandemic that we had, and the firm looks to the wellness team to provide advice on the management of those types of pandemics. The programs that we offer, we ensure are run commercially. Whilst we do have a generous budget, we do try and manage that budget very, very carefully. That therefore means that a lot of our services are fee-paying. So whilst we may provide on-site services, a lot of the facilities that we offer actually do come at a cost to the individual. So they're not offered always free at the point of use. In terms of those services, whilst things are badged under those 6 exchanges, dependent on the size of the office, which we'll come back to in a second, we provide a number of on-site facilities. So taking London as the example, we have an on-site medical centre that provides a range of services, everything from primary care, including dentistry, general practice and practice nursing services. A musculoskeletal team. So we have 6 on-site physios, a podiatrist, 2 orthopaedic consultants, and we also offer an osteopath as well. And then a range of what we call case management services. So traditional occupational health we have on-site, and a service that's bespoke to Goldman's called Critical Health Solutions, and that's both a physician and nurse-led service that provides advice to employees and their families at times of critical health need. So quite different to primary care and occupational health. Their role is to act as an advocate to the employee and their families when they've been diagnosed with either a critical health condition or their existing healthcare is proving unsuccessful. In the fitness space, where possible, we provide an on-site facility. So again, in London, we have a 25,000 square foot gym, providing everything from group exercise, so Pilates, yoga, spin, body pump, circuit classes, through to cardio equipment. We have a number of personal trainers as well, and that's, as I say, provided on-site for us. In terms of nutrition, again, we have an on-site nutritionist that comes on. We have that nutritionist for 1 day a week, and they work as part of the overall wellness exchange. In the work and family exchange, that's really where we try and support our employees and their families. Goldman's, and coincidentally this week, it's the start of our Diversity Week, has a very strong and powerful agenda behind supporting employees from a range of different backgrounds. We see the support we provide our parents as absolutely critical, and in London we provide on-site childcare, which offers parents 20 days of free backup childcare a year, and that's per child. That is not a fee-paying service. And one of the challenges that we have, particularly on the banking and trading side, is that a number of our parents struggle to get childcare early in the morning, and as a consequence, we will be rolling out what we are going to call the Second Step programme towards the end of this year, beginning of next, that will provide permanent childcare solution for children up until the age of 2. Learning and recreation are important aspects of the Wellness Exchange. They're probably not as prominent as the on-site services. So learning, we provide a number of materials, web-based and paper-based, to support the overall wellness proposition. And recreation, again, is where kind of the umbrella of recreation events, so everything from the JP Morgan Chase Challenge to teams and leagues are managed under that brand. So in terms of employees, they very much see the GS Wellness Exchange as their kind of home for the various on-site facilities, case management and programs that we run. The ultimate objective, trying to create and develop a culture of well-being. So in that context, when we look at our global wellness program, so moving on to the 4th slide, there's no doubt that while we have this global philosophy, we are challenged by a number of different factors when we open a new office. Clearly our more established offices, which have been highlighted in red, so those in New York and New Jersey, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, given their size, has made it relatively easy for us to justify the building of on-site services. Where it becomes more difficult is in trying to develop and roll out a global program where the offices are quite small, and the population size wouldn't justify building dedicated services. We have in some instances worked with other companies that share the same office block with us, but typically our expectations of how we want the programme delivered is quite different to that of our other, kind of our co-tenants, and therefore we find that model quite challenging. So therefore what we will tend to do is look either for near or off-site solutions to support the overall proposition. So there's no doubt that office size does play a critical role in determining whether we provide on-site services or whether we work with off-site or near-site providers. The second thing we spend quite a lot of time considering is the local infrastructure. That, for instance, while the office may be small, the state-provided healthcare or childcare provision may be very good. So, for instance, if we take Germany as an example, the provision of healthcare is excellent, and therefore the need for us to look at dedicated or Goldman-specific services is less than, say, for instance, somewhere like Tel Aviv or Johannesburg. So there's no doubt that local infrastructure and the availability of good healthcare services determine to quite an extent what level of support and resource and therefore investment that we deploy in each of those offices. As we will all know, the legislation is hugely complex, not just across the region, but across the globe, and therefore that sometimes means that we provide a different level of programming or a different level of support than we may otherwise have wanted to. And again, to give a real life example of that, in Germany, for instance, in our Frankfurt office, we have a need to provide childcare because of the family leave policies, which allows employees to return to their place of work within 3 years of leaving. And because of that time that enables them to return, the availability of good quality childcare is in short supply, and we've had to work very closely on bespoke solutions to be able to support those parents that want to return within that 3-year window. So that landscape does play a big difference. Cultural differences again, the role of occupational health, for instance, might be very well understood in the UK, but in somewhere like France, for instance, kind of a company doctor's role is very, very different and perceived as being very different as, the workings of someone's health condition and their ability to return to work or to advise around adjustments are handled very, very differently than they would, for instance, in the UK. So, again, we are very mindful that once we develop this global program, that whilst we're looking for parity and consistency, we do realise that local cultures or the local landscape may mean that we do something quite different. In terms of expectations, the whole debate between expats' expectations, so someone moving from the New York office compared to someone that's hired locally, can be quite different. There's certainly a cultural sensitivity there. Sometimes, and I'll talk more specifically in a second regarding Bangalore, but we're ever mindful that in providing services, we are not wanting to criticise the local healthcare or childcare environment. So we're trying to provide access to choice and to options, and not necessarily imply that there's one service available for one type of employee and another service for a different employee, the expats. So taking Bangalore as the example, moving on to slide 5, Bangalore has been a fascinating journey for us. The start of that happened back in 2004 when we work with International SOS to undertake what we call a site survey. So effectively they write a report for us that tells us about the local health infrastructure. And the findings of that report led us to make a number of key decisions. So for instance, the first thing we realised was that where we were going to position ourselves in Bangalore made access to good quality healthcare quite difficult. And we knew that, again, a number of our employees were not local to Bangalore and didn't have local doctor relationships. We knew that within certainly a short space of time, within 6 to 12 months, the office would be of a particular size and scale that would warrant us having dedicated on-site medical centre. The other thing that we identified as part of the site survey was that the response times from the local emergency services were not possibly what we would have wanted to give us the peace of mind that our employees would be treated within a short space of time. And one of the things that makes Bangalore unique is that we actually have an on-site ambulance. Now, it's not an ambulance as probably we would recognise in the UK, but nevertheless it is a vehicle that is kitted out to ensure that if an employee needs support and needs to be transported to a local hospital, we can do that without having to rely on the local ambulance service. In terms of the needs of the employees, again, they were quite different to those of our UK colleagues and those working in the EMEA region. We worked a night shift pattern, so again the needs of the medical centre reflect that in the sense that we open for 19 hours a day compared to the traditional 8 to 6 hours that we run in the UK. There is probably a greater need to have a doctor on site, and the role of nurses, from our experience certainly in India, is that they're seen more for kind of administrative duties as opposed to clinical care. So we realised that providing a service that didn't have a physician leading that service was going to make it a challenge. And we also recognised as well that we would need support from specialist occupational health advice. And that has been quite a challenge for us, as I will cover shortly. But occupational health is a very different type of service in India, one that's still developing as an offering. The roles of occupational health doctors in India, I believe that they take a training course for, I think it's 4 to 8 weeks, so they don't kind of undergo the same types of training as one may do in the UK. But secondly, the advice that they give to the business around someone's fitness for work and any suitable adjustments is not quite as well developed. And some of the challenge we find is, getting an occupational health doctor that is prepared to give recommendations in terms of how we can manage someone's return to work. So, as we started this journey, there's no doubt that we felt there was undoubtedly a need, based on this health survey that we commissioned right at the very start, but also unique demands of employees out there. We realised that building an on-site centre was going to be a key priority for us. 6 years on, and moving on, for those that can see the presentation, that is not what the medical centre looks like now. That is a children's centre that I'll touch on in a second. But certainly there's been tremendous learnings in the last 6 years, and we have continued to want to grow and develop our service. The medical centre really started off providing ambulatory care, so kind of a walk-in service where people really were looking for treatments for respiratory or digestive conditions. The nature of conditions has changed. I honestly can't tell you why that is, but we're seeing a greater demand for advice around management of diabetes, employees concerned about cardiac risk, wanting advice on men's and women's health conditions, which, as I say, has been very interesting because the service hasn't been geared for that. But we are now looking at bringing in specialists to respond to that demand. So one of the things that we are planning to introduce next year is to bring an on-site nutritionist and to bring probably a gynecologist in as well to advise women on specific issues that we have identified, as I say, in our time out there. Not just in terms of the on-site medical centre, we have also expanded in other areas. So we last year appointed a doctor to be our on-the-ground support for critical health solutions. So that now has started to expand our global network of physicians that can support employees and their families when, as I say, they have a critical health need. we've identified a need for counselling support. So whilst we had an EAP service, we are now looking at bringing on-site counsellors, given a recent increasing trend around employees interested in psychological support. And we're trying to move the emphasis away from managing those with identified health conditions to trying to create greater awareness around managing and preventing ill health and disease. So we have launched an executive medical program. So effectively, anyone at the executive director or managing director level will get an executive medical paid for by the firm, and a number of other wellness initiatives, such as an increased fitness subsidy with local gyms. We are looking at an online kind of health portal, which again, employees can get advice around maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So it's been quite incredible to see how the health agenda has moved on. And another thing that we will be introducing next year is, again, we have seen an emerging need for childcare support. So the firm has made a commitment to build a on-site childcare centre for employees to provide both backup childcare and permanent childcare. And we see that need because employees have been with us now for, as I say, up to 6 years. Their family situations have changed. They've typically moved away from their home and don't have the support of their family to provide that childcare. And as a consequence, they're coming to us and saying that in order, not only for us to remain an employer of choice, but in order for us to retain the talent that we have developed, we want to support them after they have had children or once they've had children. So the wellness program has changed quite considerably since we established it back in 2004. In terms of the challenges, Goldman's generally have a policy of using vendors, so kind of using best in class wherever possible. And I think certainly once we go into new regions and new areas, trying to find local vendors that can deliver to our needs has been a real challenge. The counter to that is the vendors that we work with in some of our bigger offices, so in either the UK or the US, we are challenged because they tend not to understand the local markets or the local cultures. So therefore it has been a real balance for us to get the right mix between having a vendor that understands the local market dynamics, but equally a vendor that understands our expectations as a client relative to our programs in other offices. And that's put real pressure and strain around us trying to, maintain global standards. And the final area of challenge for us has been around how we market the programs. As any organisation, we need to be careful of information overload. We try a range of different medium to try and make it different and unique. But it's fair to say that even once we launch programs, we see a tail off in usage or awareness. So trying to keep the programs fresh and interesting and engaging is a key challenge for us, and it's one that we're constantly trying to address. So just to conclude, say the journey is far from over, and the focus is very much around. We have just changed our medical services vendor in India, interestingly from an international vendor to a local vendor, and that has had a degree of challenges. We are in the process of offering new programs, so as I've featured there, nutrition, counselling and physiotherapy, and given again the specific needs of the local population, we will now have the medical centre open for 24-hour support. And then the other area of focus for us at the moment is on the build-out of the childcare centre and identifying a local vendor to support us with that programme. So I hope that has been helpful. I am very happy now to open it up to questions.
Okay, Patty, can you hear me now?
I can, Wolf, yeah.
Good. That was my first question. Again, I apologize for dropping off. I don't know what the problem was. Okay, well, are there any questions from any of the participants? And of course, thank you a lot, Patty, for the presentation. It was very interesting. Barry, just let me know if you catch any questions through the Q&A
session. Of course.
Yep.
Hi. If I can, go ahead. Eric Teasdale here, Dr. Teasdale, AstraZeneca. Could I ask something about the learning exchange? What is in that?
Yeah, the learning exchange is essentially the way we brand anything around our marketing and communications. So we have, slightly outdated, but we have, would you believe, a wellness library. But as most people now use kind of the web for information, a lot of that now has moved to a dedicated wellness website. So the learning exchange was part of the overall concept over 10 years ago. It probably, of all the exchanges, has probably moved the most, and as you know, most people now rely on the web for information.
Do you have any active learning programs where you put people through courses or training or academy kind of stuff to give them skills in how to handle and improve their health and well-being?
Yes, I suppose, is the short answer to that. One of the things we identified, and I know this is very topical for a number of employers, is, you know, the demands at Goldman's are high as they are, as I say, in a number of organisations, and we have looked at trends around mental health and how people cope, particularly once they're under pressure, and particularly as our industry has gone through quite a lot of change and quite a lot of regulatory change. We have looked at how best to be able to support our employees. We, for the first time, launched Resilience Week at the beginning of this year. We had a number of high-profile speakers that came to talk about a range of different topics, everything from sleep to managing your children. And a component of that was a number of courses about how to manage priorities, how to manage conflict. So whilst not directly wellness related, it was badged under the concept of wellness and resilience.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions at this point? You can either unmute yourself like Eric did, or you can just type in the Q&A.
Can I ask a question? It's Jenny Hawker here. You were saying that in India that there's now more interest, or more of the employees are coming with perhaps sort of chronic conditions and managing those. So have you actually put in any disease management, condition management programs that specifically address them and take people through a full program?
Well, I think, Jenny, I think the reason that we have seen more people coming with more chronic conditions is they have more trust in the service. I think there was some immediate cynicism about the role of a company health centre. So therefore the types of conditions we saw at the beginning were very much around, coughs, colds, diarrhea, stomach upsets. But as they have realised that it is a confidential service, we're starting to learn more about kind of the true health demographic of the population. And as a consequence of that, we are looking at being more proactive in the management of those conditions. For those with more severe chronic conditions, we have Critical Health Solutions, which, as I mentioned, is a physician-led service that provides support, and it would kind of be a very high-touch level of disease management where the doctor would work very closely with the employee in terms of their treatment plan, access to various services, identifying the right treatment plan in conjunction with their specialist, and ensuring they get access to good quality healthcare.
Right, sorry, I hadn't realised that was available in Bangalore as well as London.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my misunderstanding. Thanks, Patrick.
Patty, I just have a follow-up question to that. I know we have another one queued up here, but given the current chronic disease trends in India and the projections, do you foresee your employees to have more health problems in the future, or do you think you're countering that with your program?
I think turnover is going to mean that we're always going to have to address a variety of different health conditions. I think the nature of certainly the culture in India makes some of the health programming quite difficult. So I talked about typically Indians aren't as open regarding their health, particularly to an on-site medical service, as possibly those in the US and the UK. So, the more we understand about the population, the more specific we can be about targeting those programs. And I would say that, we remain flexible and dynamic, that as we identify emerging trends, we will look to introduce programs to address those trends and look at the effectiveness of that about, do we see those trends changing over the long term? So it's something that we will continue to monitor and continue to address.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here from Paul. You mentioned that you take local state provision into account. How have you managed expectations of expatriates who are used to certain benefits in their home country that may not be required locally?
That is a challenge. There's no question about that. The expectations of expats are very, very different to those that are employed locally. And one thing we're determined not to do is to provide kind of a two-tier provision. So, if you take Moscow, for instance, the expectations of expats in Moscow is that they should return to their home country for treatment as opposed to having treatment in Moscow. And that's not something that we can, whilst the expats may have a healthcare program that facilitates that return, local employees don't have that benefit. So we're very mindful about how we treat employees because we really want to avoid that two-tier system. So I think it is a challenge in terms of where we have mandatory requirements. Again, Moscow is a very good example. We run 3 very different medical checkup programs. We are required to do medical checkups for those with a visa. We are required to do medical checkups for those under health and safety requirements. I think they're called qualified workers. And then also we have the voluntary executive medical program. And all 3 are provided by 3 different providers. The 2 state ones are, you've got to have those medical checkups at a state hospital. And one of the challenges we have is getting expats to go to a state hospital for those medical checkups. And I think we just have to be very clear that in those situations, whilst they may have gone for their executive medical, it doesn't qualify for either their visa or for the health and safety, or to comply with health and safety. And that's, that has undoubtedly been a challenge for us. So first and foremost, we need to comply with the local legislation, but sometimes expats' understanding of what that means can make that harder than we would want.
Okay, thanks. That's good. Do we have any more questions here?
Yeah, Patrick, it's Steve Clements. Thanks for your presentations. Very interesting. Goldman's are clearly making a very impressive and substantial investment in wellness for their employees. I was wondering if you can expand on the extent to which the business looks to measure the return on that investment and how you've been able to, or whether it's desirable to have consistency in the scorecard that you use to measure that across these different locations.
Goldman's is definitely an environment that wants to measure returns on investment. I know there has been a big debate, certainly within kind of the health and wellness industry, about how best to do that. What are the metrics that we could best use? And people have looked at absence and presenteeism as a means of kind of looking at productivity. Those types of measures just don't work for Goldman's. Productivity is not a feature of whether someone's at work or not. With technology now meaning that people can work from home or work remotely, trying to track the impact of our health programs on absence or presenteeism tends not to provide anything of any great value. So therefore that makes it a real challenge. What is the return on investment for this? I suppose that kind of comes at a number of different levels. One is about once people leave and once people join, do they feel that we're offering a competitive range of health and wellness services? Our understanding is that we do. It would be naive to give the impression that people don't leave because of these services, but there's no doubt they create a degree of stickiness. So I think anecdotally we do feel that they kind of support attraction and retention. In terms of do they have a meaningful impact in terms of our healthcare costs? Very difficult to measure. I would like to say they do, and we do have some analysis to suggest that. We have very high levels of engagement across our programs. So for instance, in London, 60% of the population are members of the on-site gym, of which 85% use it on a regular basis, so that's once a week or more. And once we get our vendor to show us health trends relative to other companies, it does appear that we have a better health profile than other organisations. But I think, a lot of the data is very difficult to compare apples for apples. In terms of looking across different regions, it really comes down to availability and accessibility of health information. So trying to get health insurers to give good quality data on healthcare spend, either because the office is small or because they prefer not to give that type of data, is a challenge for us. So it does mean that kind of having a global template or kind of global analysis of health trends is quite difficult. So we tend to look at utilisation as being the best measure.
Great, thanks, Paddy. That's good. Other questions? I have one more for you. In terms of the pressures of the job and resilience, do you see a difference in terms of your employees in London and in Bangalore, or is that pretty much the same in terms of how they deal with the pressures and have resilience?
No, I mean, we see quite significant differences between those in, well, we see big differences across, across the various offices we're in. I think culture does play a big part. There's no doubt that the kind of mental health trends in India were not particularly apparent because we find that employees were not so forthcoming in disclosing those types of health conditions, either to the medical centre or to occupational health. So trying to kind of give people the confidence to flag their medical conditions, either to the medical centre, which obviously treats their health condition confidentially, or to occupational health, equally treats it confidentially, but has a responsibility back to the employer again to manage the work-related aspect. The challenges in India are very, very different to the UK, where we have a much more established programme, and managers are much more aware of the value of occupational health and the need to flag issues or changes in employee behaviour to the occupational health team. So I think over time there will be growing confidence in the likes of India to use the various services more effectively, and therefore as a consequence we can then intervene more. But I think that's going to take time.
Yeah, thanks. I've noticed that myself in India and Asia in general. It's a big stigma related to that. Okay, do we have other questions? We're getting kind of close to the end of the hour here. Last chance to... Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Rebecca Navarro from Mexico. I would like to ask about psychological support. Have you tested any employee assistance program to support the emotional and mental health problems?
We do. The Employee Assistance Program is one of our core wellness programs, and we do have the service available. The program is available in India. Interestingly, it's not very well used. I know it's not well used in most of our regions, but for some reason it's even less well used in India. We're concerned about that, so we've tried to raise people's awareness to the service through kind of a marketing program, and we're also looking to have an on-site counsellor if people feel that face-to-face is more appropriate than a telephone-based conversation. So it is certainly part of one of our core programs, but as of yet it's not well used in India specifically.
Okay, I am asking you because in Mexico I have this program and it's not working very well too. And my concern is, what about you give the employees the services but they don't use it, and the
Right.
benchmark that I have is the same in all world. Then well, I don't know what is happening with this program, kind of program.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a challenge that we face. I know, a number of employers have looked to try and identify a global EAP vendor. Certainly in our research, we haven't identified one that, can meet the needs of all our population across the world, which is why we've tended to go for kind of best in class, but with kind of a degree of consistency about how that program is deployed. So in terms of the range of telephone-based services, the range of face-to-face services, but unfortunately the level of usage is very low, which is, you know, very different once we look at some of our other services. So our case management services around critical health solutions or the on-site health services are very well utilised, but for some reason the EAP is not.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think I agree. I think this is related to the overall cultural perception too, in terms of seeking out services like EAP, and I know that they're used for different things in different countries. It's a very interesting cross-cultural comparison. But I think we're at the end. I would like to, well, first of all, really thank Patrick for presenting us this really useful information from the UK and India. Thanks again, and thanks to everybody for the questions. I think it was really useful. Please, as always, provide us with your feedback if you can, on especially going ahead, which issues or regions you would like to see covered in future calls. Our next one will be in November, and you will hear from us about that. And the last thing is, as you can see on the holding slide here, a download of the audio and visual sections will be available in a follow-up email. So just in case you missed anything, because we had audio problems at the beginning, again, I apologize for that, and we'll get that fixed. So we will have recordings for that. So thank you again. I wish you a successful rest of your week, productive week, and goodbye. See you next time.
Bye.